I was born in Ganges at Lady Minto Hospital in 1969. I grew up here on Salt Spring. I did live in Vancouver for a number of years as well. I've raised children here and in Vancouver, and I have been always very interested in how Salt Spring Island is run, what kind of community it is, how to heal the divide, things like that. The LCC stands for Local Community Commission, and it was a concept that was sort of planted during the incorporation referendum, and it's a slightly different style of government than what we have so far, and it replaces a lot of the volunteer CRD advisory commissions with 4 paid CRD commissions that will be advisory to the CRD and also work with the CRD director. In running for this position, I'm interested in gaps that I've experienced and trying to heal those wounds and gaps, because there's a lot of misunderstandings on Salt Spring that lead to this condition we have where there's the haves and the have-nots, and we really don't need to be in this position, and people characterize other people in a way that they think that they are, and there's a quiet way of depriving people of services because they feel that if people can't get services here, they will be less likely to come here. There's a feeling that a lot of people come to Salt Spring to potentially take advantage of the island, and I've found that the way that the services are handled here has been devastating. For example, many people come here, they can't even use a public washroom in Ganges, even though we have a nice one in Centennial Park. So I'd be very interested to promote an idea of potentially like a caretaker for a public washroom in Ganges, and that is a system that's worked out really well in Vancouver. There's like public washroom in every park, and they have generally somebody who lives right by the washroom, and they can keep track of it. They hose it out, power wash it every night, and they keep it locked at night but open most of the hours of the day, and that way there can be kind of a compromise, so you don't see that the washroom is potentially being vandalized because somebody's there to keep it in good condition. But it can't just be locked all the time either, because that leads to all kinds of trouble. It's unsustainable. And so instead of trying to knock at the CRD door and ask, why is this washroom locked? And then you don't get the answer. I'd like to be that person who's in the CRD who can actually speak out the answer. Another issue I ran into as a mother here with children was the difficulty in using the swimming pool at proper times. And there was a reason why we have a pool, and I actually learned how to swim in the ocean at Vesuvius Beach, and that was what we had before any pools. And we had a push for the pool because it's really important for children to learn to swim. Like, we're on an island and we need water safety. So I do commend the way the pool is run for the swimming lessons, but if you want to drop in the morning with your children, the whole morning is meant for aquafit and you can't easily get in there. And then there's also trouble with the showers because they give a very low flow, and they're meaning that if you need to go get a shower, you're not going to very much be able to use that service. So I think the reason that they're limiting those showers is because they're worried if people might take advantage of it. But what we really need is a proper shower, because there's a lot of people who are working as service workers in Ganges. They're employed, they have jobs, but they're not able to rent somewhere where they can have proper water. So they can't even get clean because there's no community shower. So they are at risk of losing their job, or they can't feel as good about themselves during the day, or they can't even get a job to begin with. So we need to really heal that divide. And also I note that I saw that the bus service, although it's improved greatly, and I really appreciate how much it's improved, the way it was run was not a priority for the Transportation Commission, and I've noted that particularly in the last 4 years when issues, there's only been one person on the Salt Spring Island Transportation Commission, which is an advisory group that will be one of the groups replaced by the LCC. The person who generally always took the bus, when she would speak up and try to communicate about how bus service could be improved for people, she was always shut down. So there wasn't a proper representative of that whole group of people who are not driving cars here. Yet there's so much funding that goes into trying to support an island where there are fewer cars, but one of the most logical ways would be to make the barriers go down for people who want to take the bus, but that just wasn't there. And I can explain some of the barriers that exist have to do with, for example, even a lack of proper bus shelters, like with no room for people in wheelchairs. The seating is really bad. There's no roof on the bus shelter, and these are shelters in really busy areas like at Uptown. There's no schedule at the bus stop. If a seat has to be removed, it's just gone for perhaps a couple weeks and nobody tells you why. There were things brought up during the BC Transit open house in 2014 that were taken note of but were never brought into play. Like, for example, elderly people need a bus buddy, so there would be maybe a volunteer could help somebody who's never taken the bus before and give them support if they're frightened to take the bus on their own. And there's also were issues with the fares in the past because the children had to always pay, and so that was a big barrier. And I worked for 2 years to try to get the family travel pass because I felt like it was really unfair that people in Salt Spring had to pay $225 for every child who was age 4 and up. So if you're going with 2 children into town, you pay $675 going into town and then $675 going back, and it wasn't doable. And then it looked like it was going to get into place, and then the Transportation Commission put an X through it and they didn't do it after all. So now we have the province who has stepped in and created the free bus service for anybody under the age of 13. So that was a really big improvement, but it had to be done provincially. So it shows an indication of how stuck in the mud everything was with trying to move services forward. And I really think that when you see what people need to support themselves to be able to come into town and go out of town again, it really needs a lot more input from the actual people, because some people's lives are just made impossible here because they don't drive a car. And so then they're told, well, why don't you just go get a car and go drive a car? And then we get this situation where people are saying, well, town is so congested, it's so full of cars. So we have to kind of work together and understand each other. And I think that everybody in politics should spend a week with no car. And yeah, I definitely would favor trying to bring the taxes down. So I'm not in favor of the CRD collecting more taxes because it also hurts the demographics here. A lot of people are elderly and they're trying to hang on in their own homes, and they cannot afford all these CRD tax raises every year, because Salt Spring Island was a place that people came because they felt like they were self-sufficient. It wasn't a place where people felt that they would go work in a factory. They were going to come, and if they made woodwork, they would do their own woodwork and they would sell it in the market, and property was cheap enough that people could do many, many things. And there were many artisans here. It was a definite arts community when I grew up: art, theater, music, drama, and it was fully accessible to everybody. Like when I was a child, I could just go to a play and go right into that play. And Adrian Rayside, who does the cartoons for the Times Colonist, his mom ran many plays here, and many very talented people We're here. The Mary Hawkins Memorial Library was done by a donation. Then later it became a huge CRD facility, and it does have many different estates and living donations that went into it. You can benefactors, and yet at the same time it's still a CRD budget line that goes till the end of 2025. And for all that money that's gone into it, then what is the actual ability to use it? Like, we can only use it strictly from 10 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. and they close it if there's a storm. I really felt like when I was a kid here that as a child here I could go out and speak my mind. The market used to be set up very casually. It wasn't run by the CRD, and any child who wanted to could draw some pictures and go and sell them. I know they still do allow children to go and sing songs and sell flowers and sell vegetables, and that is good. They've retained that. The entire market was something that people felt super part of, and also when they weren't feeling part of it, they created this rubble market that took place over near where Harbor House is now, and there used to just be a field. So people here were a lot more rebellious than they are now, and there weren't as many rules, and people kind of came here to sort of unwind from all the pressure and all the rules. And then these other narratives started getting going, like there's even a little film out saying that the market used to be a flea market, then it got taken over by the CRD, and now it's much improved. And it could be for the people who come to it, they enjoy it the way it is now. I definitely enjoyed it more when there was that kind of freedom, but I know that it's hard to run things, so probably they're doing the best they can. But with growing up here, you know, that was just one example that as a child you felt like you could just make something, sell something. Then it was also about how a person could just stand up, speak their mind. You could write a letter to the newspaper. The newspaper used to publish every letter. That was when a lot of more advertising went into the newspaper, so they had the funding. And so your name or your opinion was really important. There were really incredible people here. There were people, I like Virginia Newman quite a bit. She was really amazing, and there were artists, and they wanted to just donate to helping kids feel kind of part of things. So you know, that was sort of something where you didn't feel that you had to be quiet. So that's something that stayed with me my whole life. And later on, after I moved back here, I felt like I could go to any number of political meetings per week, and I joined many things. And I think in a way it's hard for people to not join things because there's so many things to join here. And I did go to the Island Trust meetings, like one after another since 2008. And I also have attended many advisory group meetings. I've been at the liquid waste meeting, the sewer AGM, I've been at water meetings, I've been in the park and rec meetings, I went for an unbroken 3.5 years, I went to every Salt Spring Island Transportation Commission meeting. So I've really tried to keep track of what's going on here. And I was the chair of the Ganges Village Task Force that was run through the Islands Trust, and we did work on certain ideas for Ganges. And I think that what I wanted to see and what other people wanted to see was more culture in Ganges. And I can really notice that when, like, I work in a store in Ganges and people are told, go to Salt Spring, it's this incredible destination, you'll really enjoy it. Then they arrive in Salt Spring and there's really nothing going on here. So they're coming maybe into the store late at night on a Saturday night, and they're like asking me, who's just working in there, hey, what can we do here? We've come to Salt Spring. So then I try my best to tell them. But if there were more things that were kind of an interesting type of thing, that they were a little bit unusual, some little bit of culture just going on in the streets, I'd like to see that. I'd like to see car-free days go on here. There are more ways to get to Fulford than there used to be. We used to have May Day parade all through town. Town was closed except for these big parade and Maple. We used to have sea capers, all kinds of things. And now they don't want to close the main drag. But we didn't even have that road that connects by Art Spring in the past, and still the main area was able to be closed. So I'd like to see some really magical festivals and events happening here, and that's definitely, I've seen Salt Spring and I've seen Ganges have way more going on, way more interesting stuff going on than it does right now.
Okay.
There's a thing that goes on where the CRD possibly believes that they don't get outreach from the Islands Trust. I found that when I was involved with the Ganges Village Task Force. They don't feel like the people from the Islands Trust come and speak to them and reach out to them. And I was in that position where I was trying to represent kind of some of the ideas that are going on through the Islands Trust in the CRD meetings. There was a good level of outreach from those who were running the meetings, the commissions. That was a nice level of outreach. So there are people trying to get the two together and on the same page. So it is sort of difficult because there needs to be an overall breakthrough of a different sort, because people need to see how can Salt Spring work for everybody, not just for what, like there's an idea of what Salt Spring should be, and people believe that we've already written the book on what Salt Spring should be, and so everybody who comes to volunteer are just inducted into creating this type of Salt Spring that's already been decided in 2007. So there was a big plan written for Ganges in 2007. It was written just the year before I came here. I didn't agree with the plan. I found some of it wasn't factual, but those who worked on the plan don't understand why people just don't work on the 2007 plan. So I think that we need to, the future is things that we can only imagine. It's greater than the sum of its parts. So we need to really open our minds to new ideas for Salt Spring that will really enrich our experiences here, yeah. Okay, well, I will try to bring a shuttle into town, like I believe in Park and Ride. And so that's a concrete thing that I want to work for. I was at a meeting when the idea was brought up that there should be people allowed to park up on the pool property that's up on Rainbow Road, and they could run a shuttle all through Saturday so that people could still get down to Ganges and get their shopping done and get back up to their car and get back home. And we need park and rides in a lot of places, so that's one thing that I would work to change. Another thing that I didn't like about the advisory groups, especially 10 years ago when I was attending, was that in order to present, you had to make up a delegation request over 2 weeks ahead and make sure that it was approved. And then when you presented it, you never knew if they would actually take on your ideas or not, because they could take it under advisement and you didn't know if you would hear back. So I would like the CRD to have way more public times and public coming in, and like a town hall, and then it doesn't just have to be something you've prepared ahead. You can just come in and speak to the microphone or according to what's going on the agenda. So I would change that. I want to have a lot less congestion in Ganges, and I've got ideas about that, and to remove the barriers for people who want to take the bus, but they can't because they have barriers because of the cost, or because of the inconvenience, or because they're elderly, or live in a place where they can't get to the bus stop. I want that to change, and I don't think the cost should be a barrier, because I've seen the money that's poured into so many things here, and so many things under the umbrella of green transportation. And then the simplest thing, which involves a lot of low barrier ways to get around is just ignored. And so I want to see more of that happen. So I'm really, that's a big thing, and I don't want to let it be forgotten, because I'm here for my people, and my people are those people you see on the bus. They're the people with the little kids or the older kids, and I am here for those kind of situations, for those kids who want to feel just the same as other kids when they're participating in stuff. They don't want a big barrier with a big fee structure and a lot of difficulties, and I want people to be able to come to work and have a place they can get a shower and they can feel happy and good and just the same as other people. I don't want these barriers. So that's really what I'm running for. Well, I'm from Salt Spring Island, and I'm not saying you have to be from Salt Spring, but to me, the island is kind of like my child. It means a lot to me. Like, it will be either I don't participate and certain things here really bother me, or I do the best I can to participate. So in a way, for me, the way I'm set up, it's not really a choice. Like, I really feel like I need to try to bring back some of the things that we had before, and if we can't get those things back, to really answer the question about why. I mean, like, when I was growing up, there were campgrounds in Mowat's Park, and each one had a standing water pipe, and there was a caretaker who lived on site, and they could keep things under control so they weren't dangerous there. There were easygoing washrooms at Mowat's Park, just the same as they have down at Drummond Park. It was more or less just like an outhouse, but there weren't any problems or issues with that. So if there are issues with those kind of things, then we need to find out what we can do to solve it, not just to say, let's not do it, but wonder maybe what can we do to make it better? Does it need more supervision? And even though I do respect that Mowat's Park is now for disc golf and for walking, so I'm not trying to change that or take that away from people, but I think the CRD should look for a piece of property that could